Okay, so you want to own a car dealership. You've thought about it more than once. Not the abstract idea, the specific one. The glass building on the corner you've driven past 100 times. The Saturday afternoon when the lot is packed and you're sitting in the finance office signing papers on a car you didn't completely love, and the guy across the desk is calm, unhurried, and you find yourself thinking, this is a very good business to be on the other side of. That's the picture. One of the oldest franchised business models in America, recession-tested, cash-rich, sitting on real estate that only goes up. Here's the truth. Selling cars is almost beside the point. The average new car sale at a franchise dealership nets the owner less than $200 in true per-unit profit once you strip out floor plan interest, the salesperson's cut, advertising spend per unit sold, and your share of the building. AutoNation, the largest dealership group in the country, publicly traded, running over 300 locations, disclosed in their 2022 annual report that new vehicle retail generated less than 1% gross margin on a per-unit basis. Less than 1%. On the thing everyone assumes is the product. Some dealerships make their owners genuinely wealthy. Some quietly consume capital for years before anyone admits it's not working. And some collapse fast and clean in a way that teaches you everything about what was actually holding them up. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why the most profitable dealerships in America treat the car sale like a door fee and what business they are actually running behind it. So let's start with what this actually is, because car dealership is not one business. It's three different businesses wearing the same uniform. The first is the independent used car lot. No manufacturer relationship, no franchise agreement, pure buying and reselling. You source inventory at auction or trade-in, you mark it up, you sell it. The margins look generous, sometimes $3,000 to $5,000 a unit, and the overhead looks low. This is the version most people imagine when they picture owning a dealership. It is also the version with the shortest runway when the used car market turns, because you own the inventory outright and you absorb the depreciation alone. The second is the luxury and exotic segment. Ferrari, Bentley, Lamborghini. The margins per unit are real, sometimes $20,000 to $40,000 on a single car, but the volume is thin, the clientele is unforgiving, and the manufacturer controls allocation so tightly that your entire business can be restructured by a product decision made in Maranello that you had no part in. The third is the new franchise dealership. A Toyota store, a Ford store, a Honda store. This is the one worth understanding because it has the most architecture, the manufacturer relationship, the floor plan financing system, the F&I department, the service and parts operation, the incentive holdback structure. Each one is a distinct profit mechanism, and none of them are what you see from the parking lot. Here is the thing that changes how you read everything that follows. Every single one of those profit mechanisms, the F&I income, the holdback, the volume bonuses, the service department dependency, was not designed by dealers. It was designed by manufacturers. Toyota and Ford and GM built this revenue architecture specifically to serve their own distribution economics, not the dealer's profit interests. The dealer is the last mile of a manufacturer's logistics system, and the entire financial structure of the dealership exists to make that last mile cheap for the manufacturer, while keeping the dealer just profitable enough to stay open and keep stocking their cars. That is the frame you need before any number in this business makes sense. Getting into a franchise dealership starts with the buy, and the buy is not cheap. A mid-volume Toyota or Honda store in a reasonable suburban market will run you somewhere between $3 and $8 million for the franchise point alone, meaning you are paying for the right to use the manufacturer's name and receive their inventory. The real estate is separate. If you are buying the property too, add another $2 to $10 million depending on the market. Blue-chip franchise points in major metros trade at multiples nobody outside the industry expects. A high-volume Lexus store in a coastal market has sold for over $30 million for the franchise right and goodwill alone before the inventory, before the service equipment, before the first car on the lot. Then comes floor plan financing. This is the mechanism that makes dealership economics unlike anything else in retail. You do not own the cars on your lot. A bank, usually a manufacturer-affiliated captive lender like Toyota Financial Services or Ford Motor Credit, loans you the money to stock inventory, and you pay interest on every vehicle every single day it sits unsold. A mid-size franchise store might carry 200 to 300 units at an average cost of $35,000 each. That's $8 to $10 million of borrowed inventory at interest rates that, in 2023, were running between 7 and 9% annually. Do that math. On $9 million of floored inventory at 8%, you are paying roughly $2,000 every single day before a single customer walks through the door. Every day that car sits. Every holiday. Every slow Tuesday in February. And here is the trap that nobody prices in before they sign the franchise agreement. The manufacturer controls your allocation. They decide how many units you receive and which trim levels you get. In a hot market 2021 and 2022, semiconductor shortage, inventory across the country at historic lows, dealers with thin allocations were carrying almost nothing on the lot, but still paying fixed overhead. Rent, staff, insurance, utilities. The floor plan bill shrank, yes, but the fixed cost base didn't. And the manufacturer's response to your cash flow problem is not their problem. You signed the franchise agreement. The terms are the terms. That is the inherited trap, not the price of getting in, what you agreed to after you got in. So where does the money actually come from? Let's build the real picture, one layer at a time. Layer 1 is new vehicle sales. This is what everyone sees. A customer buys a $50,000 truck. The dealership makes a profit simple, except that new vehicle gross profit per unit has been compressing for 30 years under the weight of internet price transparency, manufacturer-suggested retail discipline, and the reality that every customer now walks in knowing the invoice price before they shake your hand. In a normal market, a franchise store earns somewhere between $1,500 and $4,000 in front-end gross per new vehicle, the difference between what you paid and what they paid. That sounds like real money until you run the full cost allocation. By the time you account for floor plan interest on that specific unit, the salesperson's commission, your advertising cost per sold unit, which at a volume store can run between $300 and $800 per car, and your share of fixed overhead, the true per unit net on a new vehicle sale regularly lands under $200, sometimes negative. That number should stop you cold, because every assumption you walked in with was built on the wrong number. Layer 2 is F&I finance and insurance. The office in the back where you sign the paperwork after you've already agreed on the car. This is where the dealership makes serious money. Extended warranties, gap insurance, which covers the difference between what you owe on a loan and what the car is worth if it's totaled paint protection packages, tire and wheel coverage. A well-run F&I department generates between $1,200 and $2,500 in gross profit per vehicle sold, not per new vehicle, per vehicle new or used. And unlike the car sale itself, F&I gross is almost pure margin. The products cost the dealership almost nothing to offer, and the customer has already committed to the purchase. Layer 3 is used vehicles. Every franchise store runs a used lot alongside new inventory. The margins are real here. $2,000 to $4,000 front-end gross per unit is achievable on a well-sourced used car, and the sourcing advantage a franchise dealer has over an independent lot is significant. Trade-ins. Every time a customer buys a new car, they hand you their old one. The franchise dealer gets first look at trade inventory that an independent lot has to bid for at auction. This is not a small advantage, it is a structural one. Layer 4 is the one that breaks the entire model open. Manufacturer incentive programs. Holdback is the most basic version. The manufacturer pays the dealer a percentage of the sticker price, typically 2 to 3%, simply for selling the car, paid quarterly, invisible to the buyer. On a $35,000 vehicle, that's $700 to over $1,000 per unit that never appears in the negotiation. But the number that actually runs this industry is the volume bonus. And to understand how it works, you need to sit with one specific example. A manufacturer sets a monthly threshold. Sell 250 units and you qualify. Sell 249 and you don't. The bonus on qualification might be $800 per car, applied retroactively to every unit sold that month. 250 units at $800 is $200,000 that lands in one payment at the end of the month. Now think about what that means for unit 250. That single car is worth not just its own margin, it is worth the $200,000 bonus that would disappear without it, which means a dealer will sell unit 250 at $5,000 below invoice if they have to. They will sell it at a loss, and they will still make money on the month. This is not a corner case. This is the operating logic of every high-volume franchise store in America. AutoNation's entire earnings model depends on hitting these thresholds at scale, across every rooftop, every single month. Now, here is the part that looks safe and is not. Service and parts fixed operations is commonly quoted as generating 60 to 70% of dealership net profit across the industry. NADA, the National Automobile Dealers Association, has published figures showing that fixed ops alone keeps many dealership groups cash positive in years, when vehicle margins compress to almost nothing. And that number 60 to 70% sounds reassuring. It sounds like a cushion. It sounds like the floor can't fall out as long as the service bay is full. Here is why it is not a cushion. It is a dependency. A franchised service department makes real money. Customer pay labor rates typically run between $150 and over $200 an hour in most suburban markets, against a technician cost of $25 to $50 an hour in effective labor. The spread is genuine, but the service department only works at those margins if it is full, and keeping it full requires a customer base built on sold vehicles, which means the new car department has to keep selling not to make money on the car, but to create the future service customer who will spend thousands over the next decade in your service lane. The car sale and the service bay are not two revenue streams, they are one machine. The car sale is the acquisition cost for the lifetime service customer, which means every decision about how aggressively to discount a new vehicle, how tightly to control trade-in values, how broadly to run conquest marketing is actually a decision about the 10-year revenue value of the person behind the wheel. The structural fragility here is that this machine has a clock. When electric vehicles scale, and the timeline is genuinely contested, but the direction is not service revenue compresses because electric drivetrains have dramatically fewer moving parts. No oil changes, no transmission service, no spark plugs, no timing belts, no coolant flushes. A franchised dealer whose fixed ops generates 60% of net profit today is operating a business whose most important revenue stream is structurally tied to a product, becoming less complicated by design. Nobody who signed a franchise agreement in 2010 priced that in. The manufacturers built it in anyway. The case that best illustrates how all of this actually plays out is not a collapse. It is a machine working exactly as designed, and what it reveals when you look at the numbers closely enough. AutoNation, founded in 1996 by Wayne Huizenga, the same man who built Blockbuster and Waste Management by applying scale economics to fragmented, locally owned industries. Huizenga looked at the American car dealership and saw exactly what it was. A cottage industry running on relationship selling and local monopoly power, with almost no operational standardization across hundreds of thousands of rooftop locations. His thesis was that scale would unlock economics that a single-point owner could never access. He was right, and the numbers from their public filings show exactly why. In their 2022 annual report, AutoNation reported total revenue of approximately $26 billion. New vehicle revenue was the largest single line, roughly $14 billion, but new vehicle gross profit as a percentage of that revenue was less than 4%. Meanwhile, their parts and service business, on roughly $3 billion in revenue, generated gross margins above 50%. And their finance and insurance income, which runs through their dealerships on every vehicle sold, contributed over $1 billion in gross profit on revenue that costs them almost nothing to produce beyond the personnel in the F&I office. Here are the two numbers that matter. The F&I gross profit per vehicle retailed at AutoNation in 2022 was approximately $2,200 per unit. Their new vehicle front-end gross was around $350 per unit. Read that again. $350. on a $50,000 transaction. That is the number that takes 10 minutes of a salesperson's time, a test drive, a negotiation, a handshake, a half hour of paperwork, $350. Then the customer walks through a door into a different office, sits down across from a different person, signs a different set of documents. 30 minutes later, they stand up and the dealership just made $2,200, 6 times more, in 30 minutes on every single transaction. That is not a coincidence. That is the architecture. This is why AutoNation has spent decades investing in its customer relationship infrastructure, its AN rewards program, its service lane capacity, its F&I training protocols, while the industry still argues about how to negotiate sticker price. The negotiation is not the business. The negotiation is the cost of acquiring the customer, who is the business. The crack in this model showed up in 2023 and 2024 as interest rates rose sharply and used vehicle values began to correct from their pandemic highs. AutoNation's used vehicle gross profit per unit compressed from around $2,000 to under $1,400 in 18 months as inventory normalized, and the pricing power that once made used cars look like a gold mine evaporated with the shortage that had created it. But their fixed ops business service and parts held, because the cars they sold in 2019 and 2020 and 2021 were still in customers' driveways, still needing tires, still needing brakes, still coming back to the dealer for warranty work and recall service. The machine Huizenga built is specifically designed to survive exactly the conditions that destroy single-point independent operators. Which brings us to who actually wins this game under normal conditions. And the answer is not who you expect. Most people assume it's the high-volume operator, the person who moves the most metal. The real answer is the person who figured out that the dealership is not the asset. The land is the asset. This model was systematized by a class of dealer developers who emerged in the 1980s and 1990s, families and regional groups who acquired franchise points, placed them on land they owned personally or through a separate entity, and then leased that land back to the operating dealership at market rate. The operating dealership pays rent. The land entity collects it. The two structures are legally separate, which means the dealership's income statement carries an occupancy expense that flows straight to the owner's other pocket. The dealership business runs for operating margin. The real estate entity runs for generational wealth, appreciation, and tax-advantaged income. A single Toyota store on well-located suburban land might sit on property worth $8 to $15 million that appreciates independent of whether the car business above it has a good year. The best capitalized dealer families in America are not primarily car people. They are land people who happen to obtain a license to sell cars on land they were going to own anyway. The Van Tuyl family, which built one of the largest private dealer groups in the country before selling to Berkshire Hathaway in 2014 for $4 billion, ran this model at scale for decades. Public dealer groups like AutoNation, Lithia, and Penske use the same logic at a different level. They extract manufacturer volume bonuses that a single-point owner can never reach, because the thresholds are designed to reward whoever moves the most units in a region. The manufacturer wins, the large group wins, the landowner wins regardless. The person who bought the franchise and leases the building is the one fighting for what's left. So here is the honest accounting, side by side. A good year at a well-run single-point franchise store on a volume brand in a solid suburban market. Total revenue somewhere between $40 and $120 million depending on volume. New vehicle gross profit per unit averaging maybe $500 to $1,000 in a favorable inventory environment. F&I gross of $1,500 to $2,200 per unit. Service and parts generating a 50 to 60% gross margin on $2 to $4 million in annual revenue. Manufacturer incentive income adding another $500,000 to over $1 million depending on volume thresholds hit. All in, a healthy single-point store might generate $1.5 to $3 million in net operating profit. A bad year. Interest rates up 200 basis points. New vehicle inventory normalizing after a shortage. Used vehicle values softening. One major hail event that takes 40 vehicles off the lot while insurance drags its feet. The floor plan interest bill is the same. The fixed staff is the same. The rent is the same. Net operating profit compresses to 300,000 or goes slightly negative, while the owner is still personally guaranteeing the floor plan line of credit at the bank. And the one thing the owner genuinely cannot know going in is which year they are buying into. The real uncertainty in this picture is the manufacturer. Your franchise agreement is a one-sided document. The manufacturer can change your allocation, alter your incentive structure, require facility upgrades costing millions, and in certain documented cases terminate a franchise point when a territory is restructured legally and with compensation that may not reflect what you paid for the point in a hot market. The risk you are underwriting is not primarily operational, it is relational. It is whether the manufacturer keeps choosing you. Here is what you are actually looking at when you drive past that lot on the corner. You are looking at a manufacturer's last-mile distribution point, dressed up as a local business. The cars on the lot are borrowed. The income from selling them is almost incidental. The real money is in the finance office, in the service bay, in the quarterly incentive check that nobody outside the industry knows exists. And for the people who built this right in the land underneath the building, that the dealership pays rent on to the same family that owns the dealership. The customer thinks they are negotiating the price of a car. The owner knows the negotiation already ended before the customer sat down. You can own a car dealership. Some people get very wealthy doing it. But you are not buying what you think you are buying. You are buying a contract, a service operation, a financing business, a real estate play, and a manufacturer relationship that can make or end all of it. The car is almost beside the point. It always was.